Good morning to everybody, and coming on to know, and we are going to start with your lessons. That means you are going to open your English textbooks and open the page number, textbook page number 152. Okay, children, we are now going to discuss about your little inspiration. What do you mean by inspiration? Inspiration means what? It means if you are going to induce something, or if you are going to be inspired from something, is called inspiration. Inspired means we are encouraged to do something that should be given by somebody, or that should be encouraged by somebody, is called inspiration. Here, this is an inspiring story of a courageous girl, Helen Keller, who was both blind and deaf. Here she was both blind and deaf, and her teacher was Anne Sullivan, devoted her life to teaching her. She was spending her time to teaching of that Helen Keller, and with her help, Helen was overcome all trials and obstacles to become an inspiration for the world. Here, how the teacher was going to devoted herself towards to the Helen Keller, and how the Helen was going to be upcoming from the successes from their all the troubles and obstacles, and also to become an inspiration for the world. How she was going to be inspired to the others, we are going to observe in this lesson. Even though she was a deaf and she was a blind, but she was doing her or giving the world to her best. That was the lesson prescribed for you. Here, before she was 2 years old, who? That means Helen Keller was 2 years old. A serious illness damaged Helen Keller. When she was the 2 years old, in that time, the disease was caused for her, and that disease was going to be damaged Helen Keller's sight and also hearing. Your sight means vision, and also the hearing problem will be appeared. For that, illness was going to be taken of that Helen's visual thing and also hearing senses. And here her illness was diagnosed by the doctors as an acute congestion of the stomach and the brain. It was going to be, the doctor will be told that it was on serious effect and also an abnormal accumulation of the fluid in a body part. That is, it should be abnormal accumulation will be having the fluid in her stomach and the brain. It was going to be clotted, so the serious illness was going to be caused. In the meantime, she was going to be lost her eyesight, and also her speech problems also appeared. Think about the students when they were in the 2 years old, how they are going to be suffered up to the end of their life. But here, the Helen Keller was not thinking like that. She was going to be achieved something in her life. We are going to observe further in this chapter. And the illness did not last for a very long time. The illness was not in the long time. It was not lost for a long time. But it left her senses of hearing and sight damaged for lifetime. Here it was not going to take long time. The illness was cured, but it was going to taken as to the Helen's hearing and also sight problem or sight. It is the most dangerous thing she was going to be faced in her future. At that time, the only person she could communicate with was Martha Washington. When she was not having the hearing and also the vision, in that time she was going to converse with the only person she was going to be depending upon was, her name was Martha Washington. She was the well wisher of Helen Keller, and she was going to do much for Helen Keller. And here that Martha Washington was 6-year-old daughter of the family cook. Here that girl was also her family cook's daughter. Means she was the girl of the women those who are going to ready to cook for their family, and that woman's daughter, she was the 6 years old daughter who was able to create a sign language with her. She was going to create some sign languages for understanding what the Ellen Keller was going to be thinking, or what the Ellen Keller was needed. That was, she was going to prepare for her a sign languages. Have you seen about that? Some of the deaf and dumb are going to be making their sign languages, and those who are having the hearing problem, they are making using of their hands for making the sign languages, and this should be understandable by those who are in the position of in that opposite direction or in their opposite side. Okay, now coming on to the point. Family cook was able to create a sign language for understanding that little child. And in the age of 7, she had over 60 different signs to communicate with her family. And when she was going to become the 7 years old, she was going to communicate with the others. Helen Keller was learnt about 60 different signs to communicate with their family. For example, if she needs a bread, she was going to show that cutting of a loaf. Loaf means a bread slice. It is called loaf. And she shows that cutting of a loaf means she was needing about to the bread. And afterwards, if she was going to be needed an ice cream means she was going to hug her shoulders and shiver. She was raising her shoulders and telling that I need the ice cream. That is the symbol she was going to learn by Helen Keller. These symbols are indications of their parents, for they are going to produce what she was going to be needed. Likewise, the Helen Keller was growing little by little. One day, Helen was a bright child. She was a bright and very active child, and she was doing her the thing whatever she was going to be needed. She got very frustrated because she couldn't talk. When she was going to become anger because she was not going to talk with the others. If somebody is going to be converse with her, she was very happier. But here she was thinking that, and she was become anger because she was not, nobody can talk to with her, because she was also not knowing to speak words, and her hearing problem will be more hearing, and also the speaking problem will be lost. So she was going to be become frustrated for her life also. She became very angry and began to throw temper tantrums. When she was going to be become very angry and she was frustrated, she was thrown and she was going to become the outbursts of anger in her head. The anger will be outbursting. She was placing the things here and there and throwing the things here and there. She was going to do like that. And also, tantrums means she was having some thing about violent demonstration. She was showing her thing as violence in her life also. The family knew that they had to do something to help her. Now the family will be realizing that we are going to give some helping hand towards to her for for her life. We are going to do something. They are thinking. Afterwards, they are knowing about that in 1886, the Helen Keller's mother was inspired by an account in famous writer Charles Dickens. She was going to observe that she was needing to that read that Charles Dickens on American Notes on the successful education of another deaf-blind child. Here, Charles Dickens was written that American Notes, and he was identified or notified that another deaf-blind child, and that was Laura Brigman. That girl name was Laura Brigman. She was also having the same disability like deaf and also dumb, and she traveled specialist in Baltimore for advice. Now the Helen's mother was traveled toward to Baltimore for taking the advice from Laura Brigman. He helped her contact the local expert. He was going to take an help from the local expert, those who was going to become the local, and she need that contact who was living in the local area. Alexander Graham Bell, who was working with deaf children at that time. That means here the local expert was Alexander Graham Bell. He was working with the deaf children. In that time, Helen Keller was coming to see this person for needing about the help. Bell advised Helen's parents to contact Perkins Institute for the Blind, the school where Bridgman had been educated. Here, Bell was going to give some advices towards the Helen's parent, and they will contact they will show the way towards to the Perkins Institute for the Blind, and they will show about that the place of that Perkins Institute for Blind, and also the school where Brigman had been educated. Where the Brigman was educated, they will show, Graham Bell was showing it that the school, which was then located in South Boston, Massachusetts. It should be located in South Boston in Massachusetts, and they will given the address for that Massachusetts. Afterwards, they will coming on to the school that of Perkins Institute for the Blind. It should be specially made for the deaf and dumb children. The parents of Helens will enter for this school, and they will meet Anne Sullivan, the teacher. Here, Anne Sullivan was a older student or a former student of the school. Now she was going to become a teacher there. In the earlier, she was the student. Now she was also going to teach to the students in that school. She himself was visually impaired. She herself was going to be visually impaired. She can't see something, but she hears the words of those who are in front of her. And then only 20 years old. Her age was 20 years only. She was asked to become Keller's teacher. Now the Keller's family was needing the help from the Anne Sullivan, and they are requested that Anne Sullivan to become the Keller's teacher. And here Anne Sullivan was the best person to understand Helen's feelings, because she was also 20 years age, and Helen Keller was also in 10 year around likewise the year age will be. And so the family will be thinking that she was the best person to understand the feelings. Now Helen needed not only a teacher but also a good friend. And the family will be thinking that Helen was needing not a not a good teacher, but also she needs a good friend for learning purposes. It was the beginning of a 49 years long relationship, and it is a beginning. After that 49 years, they will make them as a long relationship will be going to be took place between the two personalities. One day, Anne led Helen to the water pump. One day, Anne was taking towards to the Helen to the water pump in the garden, and she was taken the Helen towards to the water pump and in the garden. and Anne Sullivan was pumped the water on her hand. She was going to pumping the water on the hands. She spelled the letters the water, and she was going to spell out the letters water as the water ran over Helen's tender hand, and it was going to be passed on to the hands of the Helen, because Helen was keeping her hand beside below the tap or the borewell or the pumping water, and it was passed on to the Helen's hand, tender hand. Helen was going to be repeated in several times in her mind, and she was gone repeated what the Aunt Sullivan was told. Likewise, she was repeated and again repeated several times, and afterwards she learned that the waters means like this liquid is called water. She was knowing about that this liquid is called to be water. Likewise, she was learning about that, and she felt pouring over her hand. That means what the thing was going to be overflowed from her hand, that is the water she was thinking. This is opened up a whole new world for her. This was the window for her. It was the opening thing for whole world for her. She was suddenly filled with excitement and ran around the place asking and the names of different things. When she was going to be learned that the word, in the meantime, she was going to be becoming happier, and excitement was filled with her mind, or it was going to be observed, and she was ran here and there, and she was knowing that I learned a few words, so I am going to knowing about the other remaining things she was thinking. So she was suddenly filled with the happiest moment, and also ran here and there through the garden, and also asked the names of different things. She was going to be having shown his interestedness for learning manner. Likewise, she was asking in front of the Aunt Sullivan, and Anne would spell the words in her hand, and also Anne would spell the words in her hand. This was the key which unlocked the world of her. It was the key. What she was going to be taught, Aunt Sullivan was going to be taught with the help of taking off her hand, Helen's hand, and she was instructed and she was told little by little. Likewise, Helen Keller was learned something about the things what she was going to be seen with her hands. Say she eventually stopped throwing tantrums. She eventually, now she was going to be whatever she was doing her mischievous thing, it was going to be stopped. Now Ellen learned to read Braille. Here Braille means it was the this was a system of raised dots representing letters. When we are going to be turn the page, some impressions are going to be seen. Likewise, the Braille was going to be made, or it should be written. This was the system of raised dots representing letter. The blind person can easily read that one, and likewise here the Helen Keller was going to be learn about that dots. And Helen learned slowly and also steadily. Here the Helen will be learned very slowly and also steadily. She was learning about that Braille. When she went to college, after finishing of her course in that garden, she went to the college. She passed on to the college and went with her and tapped out the words of the instructors on Helen's hand. Here, what the instructors are going to be told, and she was going to be, Anne was will be tapped with her hand or with her and also tapped the words of the instructions on Helen's hand. She was showing with tapping the hand with the Helen's hand, and she was telling likewise, this is the word. And Helen had a remarkable memory. Now Helen had a very remarkable memory. She can't forgetting the things. She was always having the good memory, and she also had an amazing skill. She was always having ready to read, and his skill was very talented, which very few people have ever been able to develop. This was going to be developed for only few people will be having developed their nature, or they are going to having the good memory. She could put her fingers on a person's lip and understand words which were being spoken. And when Helen was sitting in front of the others, if somebody was going to be spoke out something, she was placing her hand on the person's lips, and she was understanding the words, what the words was going to be spoken by the other. While she was in college, while she was learning in the college, she wrote the book. The book name was The Story of My Life. It was the book she was written by, was The Story of My Life, with the money earned from the book. And she was written that book and published the book, and it was sold by somebody. After that, she was able to buy a house. One year, we are going to observe one thing. That means her long life book was going to be having sold it, and it was going to be earned to purchasing of a house. That much of money she was going to be purchased or sold the books, and he got that much of money when she was selling the books. She became famous and traveled around the world speaking to groups of people. And she also became, she was going to become popular, and she was traveled around the world. She was moving around the world for teaching something about those who are having deaf and dumb. She was giving the education for all the people, and she met many important places and also well-known people as she traveled. When she was traveling, she was going to be meted all the personalities, those who are important to her. In the meantime, she was published the book also. Helen Keller was successful because of her the achievement, and she vowed, that means she was going to be having to be grateful of a lot to Anne Sullivan, who is an unsung hero. Here she was going to be, Keller was going to become a successful, for her successful heroine becomes, for the another lady was Anne Sullivan, who is an unsung hero. She was backwardly supported towards to the Helen Keller. So thank you children.